Well, government says that despite the GDP contraction, there are green shoots that South Africa can leverage. It says, for example, commodity prices are stabilising, electricity supply is reliable, and labour relations are less volatile. Treasury says the current state of the economy puts more pressure on government and other groups to intensify efforts to improve growth and investor confidence and stop the decline. It says the Finance Minister, Malusis Gigaba, will be seeking a meeting with business leaders soon to discuss ways of working together. Well, let's discuss ways of working together, how we got here, and why we didn't fully see it coming. We're joined now by the chair of the ANC Economic Transformation Committee, that's Enoch Godongwana, and MD of ETM Analytics, George Glenos. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start with you, Enoch, because at one stage you were saying that the downgrades could lead to a recession. Now we know we were in recession even before the two downgrades into junk. Does that shock you?
Look, I would imagine everybody else, even the markets, never predicted that we'll be where we are. Most assumptions were that we will probably be on a positive basis at common eye. So so all of us are a bit shocked with what has happened. So, yes, I'm shocked, if I may summarize.
And I want to pose this to you as well, because I've spoken to a lot of economists who've been talking about these green shoots that government is talking about, saying manufacturing data, mining data was looking better. We're going to avoid a recession. And now we have this figure, minus 0.7%. I didn't speak to you, so you're off the hook. But why didn't we see this coming?
Look, Francis, I think a little bit of context here is probably worth quite a bit. So let's just pull back the lens a second and think back to, let's think back to the beginning of 2016. In fact, for all intents and purposes, and for most South Africans, I would say that 2016 felt like one long recession. I don't think it was a particularly good year. We've been seeing it in a whole lot of numbers, whether you looked at the government finance figures, whether you looked at the credit cycle and how weak that was, whether you looked at the underlying trends in the confidence figures. There were signs all over the place. Yes, I mean, was this weaker than we anticipated? Yes, it was. It was weaker than even we anticipated, and we were seen as bearish. So it's disappointing. But to be quite frank, and especially now that we have Enoch with us, I'd like to sort of turn the discussion a little bit more forward-looking and to say, look, this is what's happened in the past. I mean, we can rehash how we got here, and we can talk about chaotic politics, and we can talk about the lack of confidence and challenge ideologies, and we can do all of that sort of thing. But yeah, I would like to get to grips with what can be done looking forward, because looking at the past is really not going to help us that much, other than to create context and to see what has worked, and absolutely we've got a pretty good idea of what hasn't worked.
So I agree with you, and let's look forward, but I think it's important, and I hope you agree with me, to figure out to what extent the chaotic politics and things like that has played a role, because then we can say, okay, at least that was something in our control or something out of our control. So this is a question for you both. Where do you think the economy would be if we hadn't had a cabinet reshuffle, downgrades, maybe a lot of indecision from government, and a lot of seemingly not much confidence from global investors? So I'm asking you both the same question, starting with you, Enoch.
I mean, there would be what one would call short-term stabilization policies, which, with hindsight, if you look, for instance, at the performance, consumption has been the major contributor to the current state of affairs, and part of that consumption is also government consumption, which has declined. I would imagine part of that has got to do with fiscal consolidation. It's not necessarily that one does not support fiscal consolidation. The question is the composition of that spending, and I think that's one of the issues, in my view, from a short-term perspective, which I think we didn't explore correctly. The second set of issues is the management and quality of the performance of our state-owned enterprises. That in itself has not achieved the desired outcome. and I think that's a matter that needs closer attention. There's a broader and a long-term issue of some structural reforms which needs to be explored. And that's what I think the discussion as between the Minister of Finance and Business should be in NEDLAC. I don't know what forum they'll utilize, but those are some of the issues that need to be looked into.
George?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think confidence and the way things have unfolded over the past 18 months, 2 years, in fact, even longer, have dealt a devastating blow, to be quite frank. I mean, you've, as I said, you've seen the signs. Whether you look at BER confidence data, whether you look at the SACI confidence figures, whether you look at the business confidence figures, our own internal confidence numbers that we create have been poor as well. So it's been across the board, and I think we mustn't be fooled into thinking that it's just one sector of the population. This is really broad-based. So we've had a lack of investment, partly as not as a result of company balance sheets not being up to it. The balance sheets are fine. There's just no confidence in investing in a country where you don't have policy certainty and you don't feel confident enough in the leadership of the country. There's no confidence at a consumer level, partly because you've got a labour market that's been deteriorating. You've, again, the same issues that have plagued business are plaguing the private sector households as well. So it's coming at people from all fronts. And then, of course, it doesn't help that your unemployment rate has continued to rise and affects, obviously, the poorer people proportionately a lot more than anyone else. So it's devastating. It's devastating across the board.
And is it unavoidable?
Well, I think there's a lot of own goals that South Africa has scored. And I do place a lot of emphasis on the leadership of the country and the way that policy has been implemented, as well as the functioning of state-owned enterprises, as Enoch has said. So I think on that front, there's a lot more that we could have done. I tend to look at other countries in the world as a benchmark. So we cover a number of countries in our business, one of them being a country like Peru, for example. Now, Peru is a country that one could arguably say has got a lot less in the way of resources than South Africa, but has done the basics right. It has fostered that element of confidence to such a degree that even as a commodity economy, it has been able to grow in the worst case scenario at 3%, but is aiming at 4 and 5%. There is a stable currency, there is a stable economy, there's employment growth. All the good things have come to that country because they've made some solid decisions and gotten the basics right. And that's where I think South Africa has let itself down. We haven't done the basics right.
Okay, so Enoch, you are head of the ANC's Economic Transformation Committee. This figure suggests not much transformation is happening. To what extent do you think that government is not getting those basics right that George is talking about, basic economic management? And then to what extent is government out of step with what the ANC would like, with what your committee would like? Or are they carrying out your wishes?
Let me start by saying, despite this performance in the first quarter, there's a positive aspect to it, in that in the first quarter we've created, compared to the last quarter, about 144,000 jobs. On an annual basis, if you compare...
But unemployment went up, population increases, it doesn't matter.
I'm coming to that point. I'm coming to the point. On an annual basis, that takes you to 538,000. So there's that positive aspect. And secondly, I accept your point in that the labor force has expanded substantially for 577,000, which tended even the impact of that growth. I'm saying, but that's also a positive aspect. Coming to the policy side, I think last week we issued a statement after the National Executive Committee. One of the issues we're emphasizing there that we didn't anticipate this contraction, where that's saying irrespective of how the economy is going to perform in this quarter, one of the key things that need to be done, we've got to make interventions that are growth and employment enhancing. We also said we need to create confidence. The areas where we need to provide policy certainty, among others, is the MPRDA. And I would agree that in certain respect, there's so much delays in a number of things which create policy uncertainty. I agree with that point. So we said these are the interventions that need to be done to build confidence over a longer term and work with business in order to achieve the desired investment levels.
The MPRDA, the Mineral and Petroleum Development Act that you're talking about has been bandied about for 3 years. Are you willing to be critical of government, and are you critical enough?
We have said it absolutely. Even yesterday we had our committee, we've said we definitely are not happy with the pace at which this legislation is being handled, and it's having an impact on confidence, particularly on one of the critical sectors where we're beginning to see positive developments in the mining sector. So clearing that act, in our view, and a number of other things, create the necessary confidence which we require. I would agree with George. Confidence is a very problematic issue we're facing. For instance, even in 2016, only the last quarter where we begin to see an improvement in investment, otherwise there's been contraction. So confidence is quite a critical factor. We would agree in that regard.
Are you willing, if we accept there's some mismanagement in this economy, are you willing to say how much of that blame should be laid at the door of our president, Jacob Zuma? And are you willing to talk about the new finance minister? Is he going to bring back some of the confidence?
Let me just say, I mean, the new finance minister, no one would fault him in terms of his posture. His posture is the posture which any finance minister should take. In that regard, I think we think he needs the support of all South Africans in achieving that objective. And I think he's quite responsible for that. Now, if we had to talk about the performance of government, obviously the president is the buck stops with him. He's the one who should be responsible and actually act on his own ministers. If a minister, state-owned enterprises are in bad shape and is not making sure that the ministers are responsible, make sure that there's proper governance and good governance in the state-owned enterprise, that is responsibility to make sure that that happens. It's not the ANC.
Yeah. And my question, would you lay any of the blame at the door of the president?
No, I would say at the law, there's some blame you can put at the level of government. And the fact that everybody is complaining about state-owned enterprise, all the rating agencies are talking about the performance of state-owned enterprises whose balance sheet is being weakened every day and poses a risk in terms of government balance sheet. So that is in itself a problem. The rating agents have said it. We have also said it publicly. That is a matter that needs attendance.
George, let's go back to policy uncertainty, and something specific came up, which I'm glad about, the MPRDA, that Mineral and Petroleum Development Act that's been on the President's desk, I think, for a long time. It has been back and forth. Is that what's happening, that we're just not making decisions fast enough? Because everybody uses this term, policy uncertainty. But what are other examples? What specifically are we not doing?
So it's broad-based, and I wouldn't want to single out any one particular example, because that is one example. I mean, the signing of the FICA bill is another example. Why has that not happened yet? There's no reason why it shouldn't happen.
It's signed.
Well, it's signed, but it needs to be implemented. So you're quite right. It needs to be implemented. So
it was signed after a lot of people got nervous that it wouldn't get signed and it would have implications for our banks.
Can I just come in on that point? I mean, the debate about the FICA bill has been blown out of proportion, because the FICA Act has been in existence for a while, and we created even an institution, which is Financial Intelligence Institution. So the Act has been there. What we have been discussing here are actually amendments to an existing legislation. So all I'm trying to say, the debate about it has been blown out of proportion from both sides of the political spectrum.
But do you not agree it was signed when the clock was ticking? We knew an international body may look at us and say you're out of step with international legal regulations around banking.
Okay, there was some slight delay, but not as much as the MPRDA. Again, I want to emphasize, in terms of stability, in terms of money laundering and the FICA in South Africa, we're amongst the leading countries in the implementation of that.
Finish your thought, George.
No, so that was a sort of another example. Then, You know, you take a step back and you have a look at the IPAPs 1 through, I think we're on to version 9 now.
I can't remember.
Yeah, we're on to version 9. And again, the point to make is if you have a look at the empirical evidence as to what's happened in terms of on the industrial production, manufacturing production side of things, you will find that, you know, in all these years that we've had all these different variations of IPAP being implemented, it seems to have had almost no impact whatsoever. It seems like we are trying to pick winners instead of looking at this at a broader policy level. When you listen to Rob Davies speaking, what you tend to hear is that supporting this industry, supporting that industry, supporting this industry, but in very focused, direct sort of ways. Now, I welcome the fact that it is something tangible and on the ground, but that's not the issue here. I think we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, but why is manufacturing in this country not able to move forward? Why are we tackling these almost microeconomic issues when there are macroeconomic problems that are not being addressed adequately? So, you know, at an industrial and a manufacturing level, we've got that. When it comes to questions around fiscal policy, for example, now here it's not an issue of policy uncertainty per se, but there's been a problem with fiscal policy for a number of years now, and we've been pointing it out. I've been on this very show talking about why we ranked the budgets at 4 and 5 out of 10. And because we felt that the fiscal consolidation wasn't happening properly, because we felt government wasn't looking at the economy properly, because we felt that there wasn't enough accountability, etc. These are all issues collectively that need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed at a policy level. So okay, we can talk about all these failures. We can talk about the lack of accountability of state-owned enterprises, the fact that they continuously have to be bailed out, these contingent liabilities that are now sitting on the fiscal book that have to be funded, that have directly impacted on South Africa's credit rating. All of these are issues that haven't been tackled properly.
So that's forward-looking. We've run out of time. Enoch, I'll give you the last word. Where to from now? Quickly.
I think for me, I want to emphasize on what we've said in our statement. That is, what is going to be required is that whether it's IPAP or anything, South Africa has got one of the strongest social dialogue institutions where every stakeholder has got to contribute to the development of this country. So if and the call we're making is that we need strategic interventions on those policies that are likely to have a quick impact on growth and employment. And that's a challenge we need to be debating about. And to the extent that there's big business that have got views, South Africa, we've got to create interesting institutions for that contribution, for that dialogue to take place. We then invite them to
So I hope we'll be having that debate on this show in future. Thank you so much. Time goes so quickly. Thank you both. Enoch Godongwana from the ANC Economic Transformation Committee, George Glynis from ETM Analytics.